right, I need your advice. Clairol number 5 or Grecian hair formula number 6. What do you think?
I think you're talking to the wrong person.
What? I gotta like freshen up my look here. I'm starting to go a little gray on the temples, which I'm okay with. But now I got gray in the field. I think I need to prep myself for sale. I didn't actually, I'm not for sale, so I don't know what I mean by that. All right.
Okay.
This is the real story with Adam and Sherry. I'm Adam Hamalian,
I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and this is where two broker associates talk about all things real estate. Hey, Sherry.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah, we're not talking about personal preparation, though. I think I'm doing okay. Um,
As long as
today,
I've known you, you've been talking about, oh, I think I need a little more gray in my hair to make me distinguished or something. And now
I,
you're talking about Grecian hair formula for men.
I know. Well, I'm almost 60, which the problem is I behave like a 12-year-old and everybody treats me like I'm a juvenile. And so I have to the little bit of gray makes people have to come to terms. Okay, makes me come to terms that I actually am an adult and I need to act like an adult.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about houses.
Yeah. That's a lot for a 12-year-old to have to talk about houses. All right. Let's talk this out a little bit. Before we get into our topic for the day, prepping houses, let's talk a little bit about the current market like we normally do. Here we are, the middle of June, the June swoon, June gloom. Any other?
I think we're at the end of June.
Yeah. Yeah.
Inching towards the end of June.
Yeah, and the market is as sluggish as we've seen it.
Yet we have escrows that are waiting to close. We have houses that are on the market. People are looking at them, talking about writing offers, yet it feels sluggish. Maybe this is the June slowdown.
Yeah, I think it is. I read an article this morning put out by somebody over at Redfin. It was a national article, but it referenced a couple California cities. And what I thought was interesting that they mentioned three Bay Area cities specifically, Oakland, San Jose, and San Francisco. And the average home price has gone down both in Oakland and San Jose,
Mhm.
but coincidentally, it actually went up in San Francisco, which does not does not make sense to me. Do you have any thoughts about why that might be true?
I don't know. Maybe I know they have a new mayor over there, and people are hopeful that he's going to turn things around. San Francisco's been in kind of a decline since post-pandemic. People left the city for the homeless issue. There's all kinds of problems, but they have a new mayor, and he wants to clean it up. And it's possible that people are moving back into offices. There's some big tech companies that have rented big pieces of property and telling their people to move back in. So I don't know. Maybe the exodus is changing course. And people are going,
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a pendulum swing nature to real estate. And,
absolutely.
it moves so far in one direction until somebody finally says, that's enough. I can't spend any more than that. Or, wow, look at that bargain. I'm ready to jump back in. And, we just work on those kind of cyclical parts of the market. And
Yeah,
for the time of the year, school's out, people are going on vacations, we're bombing other countries. There's lots of reasons why people are not looking at homes
I'm
at the moment.
laughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, some people are bombing other countries and we're like living our lives. It's the most bizarre thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It, you know,
happening.
the, you always say, I may not quote you exactly right, but people have to have a place to live.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, it's just a matter of trying to find the right space for the right size of your, I'll say, family. Obviously that, anything from a single person to, parents and children, grandparents, whatever your family looks like, trying to find the right space for you. And space for you can mean, one bedroom studio or, multi-bedroom house and for the right budget. And that the need and the desire ebb and flow based on a lot of different factors.
Home is different to different people.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, yes, I think that's all I'll say about that.
All
We're
right.
yeah.
Um, so we are actually today we are going on two different listing appointments. And these buyers or sellers rather are in very different stages in their home preparation. And so I thought it'd be a good idea for us to chat a little bit about how people might think about getting ready to sell. So one of them, they've given us a 3 to 5 year horizon on selling their house. So it's not really a listing appointment. And the other one is an investor who has a townhouse that's gonna tenant is moving out, and they're gonna put it on the market after the tenant moves out. And so they're like eminent. They want this appointment is to let's get everybody painter, flooring, whatever else we're gonna find in line. So as soon as the tenant moves out, the contractors can come right in and prep it. So we're kind of at both ends of the spectrum within a few hours of each other to have that conversation. So
It,
just
at the risk of repeating myself, because I do that. I remember, and I probably said this on a previous podcast, when my parents sold the family home and the realtor came over to the house. They sat at the kitchen table and they signed some contracts. And the realtor went out the front door, opened his trunk, put a sign in the front yard, and drove off. And the house was on the market. That does not happen anymore.
no,
How
no.
did it go from there to here?
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is I think that to a certain extent, people think that that's all that happens. Uh,
Mhm.
and that and that can happen. You could call a realtor up today and you'll sign the documents, they'll put it on the MLS, and bam, your house is on the market. And it just, that is a way to sell a house. And I think that our goal for this podcast today is to give people some ideas about conversations that they might have with their real estate agent and what they can anticipate the process to be so they can get the best results out of it. And for some people, it's just a matter of, I just want it sold. In fact, we have one of the escrows that we have open right now. The seller just wanted it sold. And there wasn't really any of what we talked about because their need was, I need to take care of this ASAP. Um, so
Yeah,
why don't
we
we
did.
talk about it?
We had it cleaned and we had it photographed.
Yeah. But did we even do professional photography? We did do professional photography.
Yes. Yes, had to warn our photographer first.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, So, I mean, I think that, it's going to sound self-serving, but I think the first step that everybody should do if you're thinking about selling is to contact a real estate professional. Um, Kind of like the listing appointment we're going on today, that their time frame is 3 to 5 years. We're obviously not signing a contract, but there's somebody that trusts us and they want our advice because they're thinking about what are the things that I might want to do to my house in preparation for sale, so we're not rushing in the last minute to do everything, or we don't make mistakes, or we want to do something for ourselves that we recognize may or may not have value when we do sell it, but we don't want to make an obvious mistake. Um,
And, we often tell people that if you're going to make improvements to your home with the idea that someday you're going to sell it and you want it to be in good looking condition for that, why not do it a few years ahead and enjoy it?
yep.
You know, you're going to spend a bunch of money fixing a bathroom or a kitchen or whatever. Do it early. Ask our advice, spend your money wisely, and then enjoy it until the time comes to put the house on the market.
And and for sellers, they don't. Well, you can't sign a contract more than a year long. So you're not signing it. You're not signing. You shouldn't be signing anything if it's a really early conversation. But the sooner you engage with a real estate professional, sooner you can tap into their wisdom about what is the market holding, what is while we don't have a crystal ball about what the market's going to look like a year from now, let alone 5 years from now, at least we can give our best advice about wisdom going forward, and what you might anticipate. And, like I had a question one time from a potential client who they were going to take the only bathtub out of their house. So there was only going to be showers.
Mhm.
And that does have an effect for young families, that
Oh,
young families need to have a bathtub when they are the youngest. And for others, there are some home buyers who want a bathtub as an adult. So let's not just limit it to young buyers with a young family. But their time frame was 5 to 10 years that they were going to live in this house. And it's like, just enjoy the shower for 5 to 10 years. Who cares that it might cost you $5,000 in 5 or 10 years? Because in a $1.5 million house, that's nothing compared to your enjoyment of the property.
Yeah, absolutely. We had that question not too many days ago from some older clients that just bought their forever home. It's a single story. They each have their own bathroom. One of them has a bathtub that an older person has to step over to get into every morning to take a shower. And the question was, is it going to hurt us if we take out that bathtub and put in a shower and then we won't have a bathtub? Same question,
Yeah,
answer, because these are people for whom safety is a more important issue than someday when their kids sell their home,
yeah,
uh, after they've passed on or gone to Rossmore or wherever. Yes, they should do what makes them happy and what keeps them safe
yeah.
in the bathroom.
I mean, these are just a couple of kind of questions that a real estate professional can give you an idea about, and they're doing it for free, right? I mean, this is, we don't get real estate agents don't get paid until there's a closed transaction. And so why not take advantage early on these types of conversations so that you can make the best decisions possible? And sometimes there's things that sellers just aren't aware are possibilities until they have a conversation with
Yeah.
an expert or professional. Think about the couple that wanted to retire down in Livermore. And if you've been listening to our podcast, you may have heard us talk about that they thought they were going to have to live in this space while we marketed it. And as we talked with them, we realized that we helped them realize that there was really an easy way for them to move out and begin their process of moving to Tennessee while we sold their house. And it probably netted them, not only did they not have to live in the house during the trying to sell it, but it probably netted them 100 to 150,000 more because we were able to put a fresh coat of paint on and a few things like that that made a huge difference.
Absolutely. With buyers, we're matchmakers, but with sellers, we're problem solvers.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So people have decided to hire a real estate agent or at least talk with them. What's the next step?
All right. Well, the next step, in our opinion, is knowledge is power. So inspect your house before you spend any money and before you make any decisions and find out what, if anything, is wrong with it.
I like to think about it as understanding what the product is. And I know that becomes very sterilized to think about it that way. But I think that's one of the mental hurdles that sellers need to get past is
Mhm.
transitioning from this is their home, that they've made it the way they want it, and it's comfortable for them. And for whatever reason, they're now making a change and to emotionally detach from the house and start thinking about it as a product that they're going to sell. And so they need to get a clear picture about what the product is that they have. There's just like with home buyers, they might be able to tell you about the floor plan, but what's behind the walls, what's under the floors, what's on the roof. And so having an accurate starting place of the condition of the house and what's there.
So give me an example of something that would happen during a home inspection that you would discover. Um,
So typically, in the area that we work in, typically we're doing an overall general home inspection and a structural termite or pest inspection, which includes dry rot and termites.
mhm.
So we might discover the presence of termites, for instance. That would be a big red flag for a potential buyer and really just for any homeowner to know about. And dry rot within that. And so those are some important things to know. You might discover, just become aware of the age of your roof and how that a buyer might look at the age of the roof. And of course, anything that might not be functioning, though typically a homeowner is aware, this window is foggy, the air conditioner is really loud when it turns on, the convection oven doesn't work. I mean, those things typically you're living in the house, those ones, but it's the things that you don't see, like the dry rot, the termites, age of the roof.
I think we call this distractions. Some things are big deals and need to be addressed in some way, whether or not it's fix it or disclose it. But sometimes it's a distraction that just makes people stop and go, I was at a house this morning and I turned on all the lights for the photographer and stood there in this quiet house and all of a sudden realized there was a loud humming in the kitchen. Loud. And is it a problem? Is somebody not going to buy the house because of that humming? Probably not. But if you lived with that day in, day out, that might drive you crazy. And I think I know that just had the wrong light bulb in one of the light fixtures. And sometimes that causes a humming. Easy fix.
Yep.
So whether it's something small like that or it's something big like, oh boy, the roof leaks when it rains. So what else besides a home and pest?
So this is kind of market by market
Mm,
on what you might do and at price points. So at lower price points, we might not even do those first two, but we might just stick with those two.
mhm,
And at higher price points, La Miranda, Danville, Rockridge, Piedmont, we'll see a more thorough a roof inspections. Certainly, the home inspection will identify some further um, inspections that might be necessary. And so those might be kind of the intermediate market. But at the top end, we're doing we want to do a full inspection. So roof inspection, if you have a pool inspection, chimney inspection, oftentimes, especially if it's a wood burning fireplace,
mhm,
doesn't have an insert. And then the communities that are closest to the bay, everything east of the Oakland Hills, particularly, we're going to do sewer laterals, and that's common also. So it's required in those neighborhoods, and a
mhm,
sidewalk inspection in Oakland while we're at it.
mhm.
In San Francisco, there's energy reports and all sorts of other details that you're actually required to do.
Yeah.
But all these things,
Very abandoned oil tanks.
yep,
Also, an inspection required in San Francisco.
yes,
Uh,
yeah. And we don't have many homes in our area that are on septic systems, but certainly if you're on a septic system or on well water, those are things that might get included depending upon the property. Not
we just did a
always.
well inspection somewhere on one of our listings in Walnut Creek. I don't
Yep.
know that I've ever done a well inspection anywhere except up in Napa and Sonoma.
Well, we did it up in Bollinger Canyon, remember?
That is true. That is true. Forgot about
Um, yeah. So, the whole purpose of doing this for the seller is um, there's two purposes. I think one is to get it for the seller to say, this is what my product is, so you can better not evaluate,
that.
valuate your property in
Yeah.
preparation for listing. But then it also gives you a chance to improve on anything that might be a deficiency or a distraction. And those are different conversations depending upon the current market conditions and the specific market you're in. And then also for the if even if you're not going to do the repairs, to disclose it at the time of listing, so that when buyers write offers, they can write an offer with that information,
Mhm.
and it's less likely they'll come back later in the transaction and ask for a credit because supposedly they would have written an offer based on that information.
What we sometimes call pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Uh, our,
What's the strangest inspection you've ever been a part of,
um, that's a good question. Strange, I'm not sure.
or unusual, rare?
Yeah. I had a client one time do a radon test,
Oh, wow.
and there are other parts of the country where radon is much more significant than it is here in the Bay Area. And they had come from one of these communities, one of these places, and so they really wanted to have a radon test.
Yeah.
And they put sensors in the house and let it sit there, I think, for 3 or 4 days
Wow.
to see how much of the radon accumulates in the house when it's all shut up. I don't have that exactly right because it was the only time and I hardly remember it.
Is
Uh,
radon naturally occurring
yes.
asbestos? Yeah.
No, not naturally occurring asbestos.
Naturally occurring.
It's a different element, but it's
You
uh
can tell we don't do those inspections out here because I don't recall from real estate training what it is, but
yeah. So
it's very
it's a
common in other
gas.
parts of the
It's a
country.
gas that comes out of the earth and can get trapped in the house, and then it's detrimental. I'm not even sure what how it is.
I'm Googling it.
Yeah. We
I think the weirdest inspection that I've ever seen is we sold a house down in Danville a couple years ago, and the agent and the buyer did a tree inspection.
The tree inspection.
They
That's
had
actually
someone
really.
come out, that was on Verona. They had
Oh yeah.
somebody come out and inspect there were big redwoods in one part of the house that when I've sold that house a couple times. I think that was the third time I sold that house. And the original sellers, when they added on a master bedroom, had to put up a $25,000 bond with the city of Danville to protect the redwood trees that were in that backyard. And there were other trees on the property. And so the buyer wanted to know, how healthy are those trees?
Was it redwood or oak trees? Seems
They
like it
were
was.
there were 5 redwood trees back in the corner.
Oh, a bond for those redwood trees. I thought that was the oak
20,
tree, but
no,
interesting.
25 grand. Although, you know what, in the current environment, I'm not sure that that would be an advantage, because we're seeing, when it rains, we're seeing trees fall down on houses. And sometimes trees cause fire. You know, the eucalyptus trees over in the Berkeley area are like
Yeah.
little fire bombs when there's a fire.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah, redwood trees will not be fire bombs, but yes, eucalyptus.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Um, yeah.
All right. So what's
So those
step
are,
number? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So that was just going to say, go ahead. That was step number two.
What is step number 3?
All right. So based on all of those reports and based on market conditions, then a seller with the agent's consultation might decide what they're going to do to polish up the house and
Mhm.
make it ready for sale.
Yeah.
And it's pretty common for sellers to do things like paint and new flooring. And it depends on the kind of flooring that's there. If it's hardwood, maybe it needs to be refinished, although hardwood is a little bit more durable and
Mhm.
resilient. And then, light fixtures, bringing them up to date, doorknobs and hinges. Over the years, have they been gotten sloppy paint on them and would so like per door to put new hinges and doorknobs on is like $25 for material and maybe another 25 for labor. So $50 per door, you can make all of those look nice. Sometimes replacing the doors if they're old slab doors. It's just but
Yeah.
it's very market dependent, right?
Mhm.
What is and price point. And if you're, selling a $800,000 house in Concord, you're going to approach the polishing up very differently than a $2 million house in Danville.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is what does the market hold, but also the quality of the updates, right? You can't just slap a $15 doorknob on a $2 million listing, but you can do that for an $800,000 house in Concord and make a big difference. And so trying to, what is the market? What are buyers looking for? And can you do some upgrades like that that'll pay you back in multiples?
Mhm.
And sometimes it's just increasing the dollar value, and sometimes it's getting past the I'll say ick factor, right? Nobody wants to buy somebody else's dirt, and so it's what are you going to do to make the house look as if it was new for somebody?
Yeah.
And this is a whole lot easier if you move out to do this, right? Because it's interesting. We're not allowed to advertise um, floors as new.
Mhm.
We put carpeting in, and the lawyer says, well, as soon as somebody walks on it, it's no longer new.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're gonna parse these words, newly installed floor.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but the general point is that's one of the reasons why it's easier to sell a house when it's vacant is because you aren't living in some with somebody else's belongings there, which will have their own feel.
Yeah.
Now, what are
We
some other things that
sold a
that
house.
sellers do?
Well, we sold a house in Concord a couple of years ago that the ick factor was pretty high, and it involved us hauling all of the kitchen appliances to the dump because there was
Yes.
no way to unick them.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, it could be everything from, just a good house keep cleaning to a kitchen remodel, which obviously the seller would, need to take care of that sort of thing. But sometimes it makes sense to invest in a new kitchen, especially if there's a big gap between what it would sell the way it is versus if you redid a kitchen. And I mean, We always say that we don't want you to spend $10 to make $10. If you want to spend $10 to make $100, yes, that's a good thing. So,
Yeah. And a seasoned real estate professional that's active in that market can help sellers identify what are the things that are going to make the biggest result.
yeah.
And it's never a guarantee. And there's always risk involved when you do things.
Mhm.
And the challenge here is, of course, there's no A/B test proving. There's no two houses identical right next door to each other where one has a remodeled kitchen and one doesn't, and how they sell differently. And so it does take a little bit of art form for a real estate agent to share from their experience what makes a difference.
Yeah. Hire somebody experienced and who works in your area.
I think there's a couple things that sellers sometimes miss that can make a big difference, and it has to do with first impressions. So we talk about doing landscape freshening up,
Mhm.
greening up your lawn, putting bark down.
Yeah.
I think attending to your front door and your street numbers are really easy ways to impress the people as they approach your house. So obviously the landscaping I kind of just referenced to, but if your door is faded, the finish is coming off, spending the money to paint your front door, even if you're not doing anything else, and
Yeah.
maybe even a new lock set for $150, $200, you're setting a tone for somebody as they begin to walk into your house.
Yep.
Here are the things that, oh, look, this house is taken care of even before they walk through the door. And with that mentality as they walk through the house, they've already come to the conclusion this house has been taken care of because the front door was taken care of.
Absolutely.
And
First
like
impression, very important.
and likewise with the house numbers, putting on new house numbers. Sometimes, I mean, if you've got if they've been redone recently or they're lit up, that's fine. But if you've got the ones that you can get from Ace Hardware that were put on the house in 1964, it might be time to update those numbers.
I am pretty sure we showed a house a couple weeks ago that did not have any house numbers
That's true. I think that house got flipped and they took the house numbers down and never put them back up.
and never put them back up. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. Well, what's next after you?
So now we're getting close to actually getting the house on the market.
Mhm.
So you picked an agent to be your advisor. You've done a deep dive into your house, reflected on what was going to be good to fix up. You've done that. Maybe it's painting, flooring, fixing up, as we just mentioned.
Mhm.
And then the next step is the final preparation. And so this is like a final cleaning. This is really putting the polish on it. Um,
Mhm.
you know, making sure the landscape, the last hit on the landscape. You don't want to redo the landscape too soon, but it'd be great to, put the bark down and have everything trimmed up right before you take photos.
Yeah.
And typically your real estate agent will pay for that part of it. It's all depending upon on how you negotiate that. Um, so cleaning windows. Oftentimes, you'll see new homes have taken down screens, and there's always a lot of question about this, both from home buyers and home sellers. Uh,
Yeah.
but we want to take the screens down for a couple of reasons. Sometimes the screens don't look very good, that they're a little bit older.
Yep.
That might be one of the things you fix up, maybe not.
Yep.
But also by taking them down, you're allowing just that much more natural light to come in through the windows.
Yeah.
And there it goes back to that curb appeal also. When you first pull up into a house, when you see all the windows reflecting back and not just half of the glazing that you see, it makes an impression on people. And then when you're inside the house, obviously the natural light.
Yeah.
What are some other things that agents and sellers do in preparation for the market?
Well, probably one of the most important things that we do is we have the house staged.
Oh yeah, I totally skipped that step. Yeah.
Well, it's part of it's, the house gets cleaned and then it gets staged. That's kind of go hand in hand. Cleaning happens one day, the next day the stagers come in. So
So why not just use homeowners furniture? Why use staging furniture and why is that important?
I think it's hard for a buyer. We've discovered in the last couple of years that it's hard for buyers to come in and look at somebody else's belongings and imagine themselves living there. We have started doing what you and I call whitewashing homes. Before it was probably called Pottery Barning homes, where everything looks like a showroom or a display in a nice furniture store. Neutral furniture, neutral paint colors, things like that, with little pops of color here and there so that buyers can see past someone else's stuff to say, oh yeah, this looks like how I want to live my life. I can imagine myself being here. I think I might want to make an offer. It's in a way so superficial because eventually all that staging is going to go away and it's just going to be four walls. But many buyers nowadays can't get past the point of imagining themselves there if there's other people's stuff or if there's things to be done.
Yeah. I think that, even some of our clients who have really nice furniture, the
Mhm.
furniture still feels lived in.
Yeah.
Whether we want to admit it or not, where we sit on the couch is obvious. If you've had a couch for 5 minutes, there's going to be a place that it's obvious where somebody is sitting, or in my case, where the cats sit. Um, there's a on the back of our couches, there are these dents where the cats, that is their spot. Not to mention a few places where their claws have taken its toll. But even if you don't have pets and you sit on your own furniture, it just looks lived in. And that's one of the things that we were just talking about of people don't want to buy somebody else's dirt. Well, they don't want to buy a couch that looks like somebody else has been sitting in it for 20 years. Your Archie Bunker chair is not going to cut it.
It's
Um,
interesting because many times after we've staged a home and the seller sees it for the first time, they don't necessarily like it because they're used to their stuff and it does not feel homey to them. And we agree, you don't sell like you live.
yeah,
And if you haven't up to that point separated from this is my family home with all the memories to this is an asset that I'm liquidating, that's the point at which it should happen and usually does happen
yeah.
because it doesn't look like their house anymore.
I think there's two other reasons to stage. One is just the visual nature of an empty room, like you're alluding to. People don't have an idea about how the couch conversation triangle is going to work, right? When we decorate living rooms, for instance, there's a certain amount of distance between chairs and couches that are natural for us to have conversation when we know we could talk to each other without having to yell,
Mhm.
but have enough space that we don't feel like we're totally in each other's. And so the staging furniture, that's just one example. That's the staging furniture gives you an idea about how those rooms can be decorated eventually when you move in. Uh, but not so much that the room feels crowded, right? We're not filling every nook and cranny that when we live in a house, I'm looking at the bookcase behind you. Your bookcase is completely full with all things that you love.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm sure there's
It's kind of staged, actually.
well, it does. I know it is kind of staged because I know it's on your bookshelf. There's got to be cookbooks on there. There's got to be quilting books on it. There's got to be interesting books that you've been inspired by different people. I see some artwork.
Artwork that I made,
Yeah. But it's full, right? And so when
some
I,
dolls that someone gave me.
but the point is that that is your space, and somebody else might walk in and feel like this is not my space. This is Sherry's space because it's got
Yeah,
all her quilting and
yeah.
cookbooks and whatever else you have there. So
Or it becomes a distraction because instead of looking at the house, they stop and start looking at what's on the bookcase.
yeah. And so that's the second reason is to kind of what create the possibility without overwhelming. And a third reason is an empty house echoes and just feels cold.
Yeah,
And when you walk into a house that hasn't been staged and you begin to just even have a conversation, it just feels like it doesn't, it's not immediately inviting. It
yeah,
it has this cold, standoffish sort of appeal. And so
yeah,
one of the things that is become available in recent years is virtual staging. And I'm not going to poo-poo it because there are places and times and budgets where virtual staging pays off. So we did it for a condo. Was that just in January when we did it on Walker Avenue?
a year ago in January.
A year ago. Okay. So it was a condo on the fourth floor. I don't know. and with an elevator, and we
A
had no
tiny
idea.
elevator. There was no way a couch was getting in that elevator.
Yeah, and so we just made a decision for with the seller's consultation approval, of course, to do virtual staging rather than pay for all that furniture up. And I'd say, we got away with it also because there was carpeting and it wasn't quite as echoey as a house that had hardwood floors, but it also wasn't that big of a space. And for I think it was $25 a photo. It wasn't that. I think it was like 150, $200 to do the
Yeah,
whole to do the whole
as opposed to
place,
5,000
as
to
opposed,
do
yeah.
something.
Um, so there are times when the virtual staging works, but for single family homes, especially with harder surfaces, the real staging makes a difference when somebody comes into the house and how they feel and what it's, what the presentation is like. The photos, and we'll talk about that next in a sec, but that's also the consideration is the photos. So we move on to that.
Yes, yes. Tell us about photography.
Well, so all of you who are watching this undoubtedly know because you've done it yourself is that home buyers are shopping online. Like they don't, the Sunday open house ad, I'm not even sure it physically exists anymore, but
I
um
think it does, but
uh,
we haven't run an ad in a Sunday open house for
no.
ages.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people do you know get a newspaper delivered to their porch?
Yeah.
So,
Um yeah, I think Rossmore. Rossmore's the only place where we
and it's free.
that's a free newspaper. Exactly.
We pick them up and throw them away all the time.
Yeah. But buyers are looking online and non-buyers are looking online. Potential sellers are looking online also, what other things are happening. And so taking photography with that mentality is really important. And that in the market that we work, there are not any agents, very, very few agents that are using their iPhone to take photos for the online marketing, even as great as phone photos are nowadays, and they are pretty amazing. Just having the longer focal length and in whether they're using light systems or an HDR program or something to enhance what they look like, but to bring those spaces to life online to make them inviting is really critical.
Yeah, I always say you can't sell a house if you can't get people in the door, and the way you get them in the door is great photography.
Yeah.
So, all
Starting to
right.
see more videos nowadays.
Yeah,
Mm.
I'm
Uh,
not a video person, but I know a lot of people are. I don't have and this is going to sound ridiculous. I don't have the patience to sit through a 1 minute video and look.
yeah.
I want photos. I want to be able to click.
Yeah, that is interesting because with the video, you are dependent upon how fast the video takes you from space to space
Yeah,
and being able to swipe um the photo to the next one because everybody's got a little different priority for most people, the kitchen is really important.
yeah,
The primary bedroom, bathroom is probably second to that.
yeah,
And then depending upon if you have young people living with you, do you have is it small children and is there a place for them to play inside and outside? Are there older teenagers that might need a game room or a place to be their own separate from other adult activities? Those are all things that people will swipe through on photos to find, depending on what their specific search needs are.
hmm
They tell narratives too about things like pools and hot tubs that maybe might have to read. It's easier to find in the photos than read through the fine print about what's included. I can't tell you how many times I'm trying to figure out if a house came with a microwave, built-in microwave, that it's just been easier to go to the kitchen photo and see is the microwave on the counter or is it the hood above the oven? Because it's so much easier to do that than to read through the fine print if there's a microwave.
Yes, yes. I agree with all of that. Good photography sells a house.
Yeah.
So,
Other marketing tools that you've seen.
floor plans are becoming more and more popular. We're seeing a lot of those. It used to be you had to hire somebody to build them. Now we're starting to see fairly decent floor plans being generated with the use of an iPhone.
Yeah. We recently did that for the first time. There's a new floor plan service from our MLS,
Hmm.
our I should say our realtor board.
Hmm.
And we use it for a rental. I mean, we have a floor plan artist that we love that we're going to
Yeah,
continue to use for listings because it looks much
absolutely.
better than this free version. But when it comes to leases, there's less money available to do that kind of marketing thing. But having something to help people figure out where all those photos go is really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. We used to do beautiful 4-page brochures. In fact, we still do them, although they're less important now than they used to be. Normally, we it includes the gorgeous photography that our photo photographer does, as well as the floor plans. And mostly, people just take one, flip it over to the floor plan, and keep going because that's what's important to them. But
Well, and they just don't want the paper clutter, right? They
right
know that they can go look at it's easier for them to go look at that house on their phone
on their
than
phone,
it is
yeah.
to figure out where that paper brochure is. So even paper brochures are going by the wayside.
Yeah. So, and then of course, other advertising, marketing, social media, things like that. It's
Yeah.
all that. So,
Um, it every property marketing is a little bit different, depends on specifics about the market. And typically, open houses are part of that marketing routine. Um, there are some communities like Rossmore, which does not allow open houses as a free for all, but there are designated days that the Realtor Association has negotiated with Rossmore to have
mm,
those open houses. There are brokers tours, which are typically during the week. They play a different role than they did 20 years ago, thanks to the internet. It used to be that brokers had to go to brokers tour to preview the properties before so they could see it themselves,
yeah,
before, so they could tell their clients about it. And now their clients are finding out it before they get a chance to go see it themselves, let alone brokers tour. So,
yeah.
um, uh, there's a current trend, and people have been following our feed have heard us comment on it. There's a major broker that works in our area that is doing something called exclusive listings.
Mhm.
Is uh, I have some strong feelings about it. I'm just curious if you have thoughts about the idea of an exclusive listing and what do you think the exclusive listing means?
Well, I think exclusive listing is when something is sold off the market within two cooperating brokers. Sometimes it's one broker representing both sides, and there's certainly a need for it in some circumstances. But we always say, and everyone knows, there are statistics that prove it, that you make the most amount of money when you expose your listing to the MLS and as many buyers as possible.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. There's a house for sale on my street, and the homeowner advertised it in a Facebook group that they were going to be selling it, and it was with this brokerage that does these exclusive listings.
Mhm.
And and so I asked them, like, why did you choose to do that? And they said because they have a young family and they didn't want people to see the house. Uh, and I just wish them luck. And I thought, how are you going to sell the house if people can't see it?
Yeah.
It just
People don't
didn't.
generally buy houses sight unseen.
It was just. I don't think she anticipated that nobody would look at it, but she
Yeah.
was just hoping to restrict it to just serious buyers. And the
Yeah.
problem is, how do you know who the serious buyer is unless you've exposed it to the full market?
Exactly.
And so 2 weeks went by, and now they have a sign out in front, and they had an open house on Sunday and brokers tour
Yeah.
yesterday. And I just wondered, did they lose 2 weeks of marketing time because the broker convinced them to do this exclusive listing that was really only visible within their brokerage or people who happen to see this Facebook post?
Yeah.
Um, I th I think for the vast majority of sellers, it's a mistake to do something that's called an exclusive listing. And I don't know what the stats are on it. And there's lawsuits going on about it right now, back and forth between Zillow, who has put their foot down and said, if you choose to do the exclusive listing route, we're not going to show your property at all,
Yeah.
which kind of feels extreme, but it also is. And this broker is surprised. Why are you upset with us? I'm like, because you're jerking the public around. I mean, like it's not just that you're messing with other agents trying to show your house. I'm less worried about that. It's more of this is why people don't trust real estate agents because they they think that real estate agents are talking them into something that's not for their benefit, and they don't find out about it till the mistakes are already made.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
All right, so we do all this photos and floor plans, maybe videos. We put it on the multiple listing service, which gets out to places like Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com, and the clientele, the potential buyers look at it, find it, and they want to write an offer. And so, from the seller's standpoint, I always get the feeling that sellers think that they're going to get multiple offers in less than a week on every property. Sherry, do you have thoughts on that?
For the last several years, that was the case. In 2021, we would be out showing a house, and the buyers would say, I love this house. I want to write an offer. And we would jump in the car and head back to the office and call the agent and say, don't sell it without me because we're writing an offer. And sometimes they would say, well, we already have an offer we're about to accept. And that was days after a house came on the market. And we got used to that. That was a crazy year, that frantic rush to write offers. That's changed. That has
Yeah.
changed. It's not exactly the same.
This is such a market dependent um, aspect to even talk about it, right? I mean, there are places in the country where 90 days on the market is normal, is a neutral market.
Mhm.
And here in the Bay Area, it's, seriously for the last, not the last 18 months, but prior to the interest rates going up, if a house was on the market more than 10 days, that people begin to ask what's wrong with it.
Wrong with it. Exactly.
Yeah. And we're, and even like, so using Rossmore as a microcosm, because I've dug a little deeper there, it feels like there's this big glut of inventory, and there is. There's 100 homes on the market in Rossmore, and over the last 5 years, it's been closer to 60, and that just really exploded about 4, 5, 6 months ago. But the reality is they're selling at the same rate. And the average days on market is 45, which historically is not bad for Rossmore. That's typical. Um, and I think part of what we're seeing is that homes are sitting a little bit longer and prices are getting softer. And so, where, you know, it, 2 or 3 years ago, if your neighbor sold for 500,000, you were listing at 525.
Yeah.
And now, if your neighbor sold for 500,000, you should be listing at 495.
Yeah.
You might get five for it,
Yeah.
but you can't assume the increase. And so that's part of what's happening in Rossmore. And I think that to a certain extent, we're seeing that kind of sprinkling of marketing ideas
Mhm.
permeate the rest of the market as well. Townhomes and condos kind of being the test case for that, but even on single family homes.
Yeah.
So
Can we-
what do you think, typically agents have been saying we'd like to do 2 weekends of open houses.
Mhm.
But still that's only, at best 14 days and really more like 10 days.
Yeah.
Um, what happens after that? What should sellers anticipate? Uh, is 10 days? What's a typical marketing time for a single family home? So once the house hits the market, it's pretty typical for agents to do open houses 2 weekends, maybe both days, both weekends, or maybe just Sundays.
Mhm.
And that could be as short as 10 days to get 2 weekends or as long as 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What should sellers anticipate time frame for selling a house in the current market or in a typical market in the Bay Area?
We talked to an agent last week that said that this is a market where it is property by property. And I don't think that there's any phrase that really explains to a seller what's going on right now. So And we used to be able to say, yeah, we're going to put the house on the market on Thursday or Friday. We'll be open this weekend. And on Monday, we'll evaluate whether or not we want to set an offer date. And sometime that week, we would get offers and we go into contract. I think for many, the majority of properties, that is off the table right now. We're still seeing some of that with exceptional homes, but it's property by property. So I think setting expectations at the listing appointment or at the pricing appointment right before we go on the market is important so that sellers know we're not really going to have a firm grasp on response until we've had the open houses. And then we will evaluate after that happens. We can tell a lot about activity on a house based on how many people we get coming through the open house and how many people are pulling disclosure packages.
Yeah. I think that some in this market and it's as it's softening, I think that there's a tendency for both agents and home sellers to overprice a home accidentally, not substantially, just like we were just saying, whether you wanted to list it, if it sold at 500,000, you should list it at 495.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that short of having a really harsh reaction of the first weekend, uh, you're not going to have a price reduction conversation, I think, till you're 3 weeks or 4 weeks out, been on the market.
Yeah.
But we're starting to have those conversations because as the market shifts, we're starting, there's a danger of chasing the market down. And so, kind of the maybe a final thought here as we talk about prepping the home and pricing or marketing is that pricing is super important. And that really is, like you said, a property by property specific. But I would tell sellers right now is not the time to be aggressive on your pricing. And that being conservative and pricing it what the market is allowing and not anticipating, for sure, not anticipating overbids.
Mm-hmm.
And the exception of that is if you're intentionally marketing it below its substantially below its market value. Um,
Yeah, I think it's important to remember as you're prepping a home for sale, all the spaces that we've talked about throughout this podcast are all in preparation for that pricing appointment right before the house goes on the market.
yeah, yeah. And while you need to have a list price on the listing agreement when you originally sign it with that agent, um, really you need to everybody needs to revisit that price right before you hit the market because in the preparation time, the market could have shifted. There could be new information, new closings, and
Yeah.
that is the best way to have a successful transaction. So, uh, I think that that's as far as we're going to go here. We'll talk about negotiating contracts another time. But
Yeah, that's
um,
a whole different podcast.
yeah, so from first conversations with a real estate agent till getting an offer is all we're able to cover today. Any final thoughts about that process? Things that are really important for potential sellers to think about?
Yes, I think it's important to hire a real estate professional who will communicate and who will tell you what their experience has been so they can give you the best possible advice. And most important, tell you the truth even when it's hard to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds like good advice. If you
Anything
are,
to add to that?
yeah, I was just going to say, if you're a potential home buyer or home seller in the Central Contra Costa area, we would love to help you have that conversation, whether you hire us or not. We'd love to make sure you're on the right track. If
Yeah,
you're listening to this and you're not in our area, we do have a referral network, and we could probably get you in touch with somebody in your area. So just reach out to us. We'd be happy to share that advice for you with you. We think the sooner you have a conversation with a real estate professional, the sooner you'll be on the right track, have a sober, clear idea about your house and what its best assets are and ways to make sure that it is market ready, whether that's just simply us cleaning it or whether there's actually some work to be done to your home.
absolutely.
All right. Dorothy was right. There's no place like home. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.